Sometimes the most dangerous monsters don't hide under beds or lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes they sit across from you at Sunday dinner, carving the turkey while hiding secrets that could destroy everything you thought you knew about your family. My name is Sarah, and I'm 42 years old now, but this story begins when I was just 10 years old, living in a small town called Millbrook, nestled in the mountains of Colorado. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where doors stayed unlocked, and where family meant everything. Or at least that's what I believed, until one autumn afternoon changed my life forever. It was October of 1991, and the leaves had just started turning those brilliant shades of gold and crimson that made our town look like something out of a painting. My family was gathering at Uncle Robert's house for our monthly Sunday dinner, a tradition that went back as far as I could remember. Uncle Robert lived in this sprawling Victorian house on the edge of town, the kind with too many rooms and creaky floors that seemed to whisper secrets if you listened close enough. He was my father's older brother, a successful real estate developer who always had the newest gadgets and the most expensive cars. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success. But even as a child, something about him made my skin crawl. Maybe it was the way his eyes lingered too long, or how his hugs always felt like they lasted a heartbeat more than they should. That particular Sunday started like any other. My cousins and I were relegated to the kids' table while the adults gathered in the formal dining room, their voices a constant hum punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. After dinner, while the adults settled into the living room with their coffee and brandy, we kids scattered throughout the house to play. My cousin Michael, who was 13 and thought he was too old for our games, suggested hide-and-seek with a twist. The lights would be turned off in the unused wing of the house, making it more challenging and, in his words, more fun. I should have known better. I should have stayed in the well-lit areas where the adults could hear us if we called out. But I was 10, and I wanted to prove I wasn't scared of the dark. The unused wing of Uncle Robert's house was a maze of empty bedrooms and storage areas. Most of the doors were locked, but I knew about a service corridor that connected to what used to be the servants' quarters. It was narrow and dusty, with wallpaper peeling at the edges, and a musty smell that made me wrinkle my nose. But it was the perfect hiding spot, or so I thought. As I crept down the corridor, trying not to sneeze from the dust, I noticed a sliver of light coming from under what I had always assumed was a closet door. Curiosity got the better of me, and I turned the handle, expecting to find maybe a forgotten lamp or a window letting in streetlight. What I found instead was a nightmare dressed up as an office. The room was small but meticulously organized. One wall was covered with corkboards, and on those boards were photographs, hundreds of them. Pictures of children, some playing in parks, others walking to school, many taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. My stomach dropped when I recognized some of the faces. There was Emma from my Girl Scout troop, and James from Sunday school, and, oh God, there was me. Picture after picture of me at soccer practice, at the swimming pool, getting into my mum's car after school. Some of the photos had dates written on them in neat handwriting, going back years. But it wasn't just the photographs that made my heart pound so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. On a desk in the corner sat several leather-bound journals, and next to them a video camera connected to a small television. The TV was on but muted, showing grainy footage of what looked like a playground. I recognized it immediately as the one at Millbrook Elementary, my school. My hands were shaking as I picked up one of the journals, though part of me knew I shouldn't, knew that what I would find would change everything. The first page I opened to made me drop the book like it was on fire. The entries were detailed, disturbing accounts of watching children, of planning, of fantasizing about things my 10-year-old mind couldn't fully comprehend, but knew were wrong, so terribly wrong. I heard footsteps in the corridor, and panic shot through me like electricity. I shoved the journal back where I found it and looked for another way out. There was a second door on the far wall, painted the same dingy white as the walls, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. I slipped through it just as I heard the main door handle turning. The second room was even worse. This one had filing cabinets labelled with years, and on top of one cabinet was a box with my name on it. Sarah M. It said in the same neat handwriting from the photographs. Inside were not just pictures, but other things too. A hair tie I thought I'd lost at a family barbecue, a friendship bracelet that had disappeared from my backpack, even a page torn from my diary that I kept hidden under my mattress at home. The footsteps were getting closer, and I could hear voices now. Uncle Robert's voice and someone else's. My father's. They were talking in low, urgent tones, and I heard my name mentioned. I couldn't make out all the words, but I heard enough. "She was in here," Uncle Robert said. "The door was open." And then my father's response chilled me to the bone. "We'll deal with it. She's just a kid. No one will believe her anyway." I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall, praying they wouldn't check the second room. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I heard them leave. I waited, counting to 100 in my head 3 times before I dared to move. I slipped out of the room and made my way back to the main part of the house, my legs feeling like jelly. I found my mother in the kitchen, helping clean up from dinner. She took one look at my face and asked if I was feeling sick. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She felt my forehead, declared I might be coming down with something, and announced we were leaving early. The car ride home was torture. I sat in the back seat, watching my father's face in the rearview mirror, wondering how the man who taught me to ride a bike and checked for monsters under my bed could be involved in something so horrific. My mother chatted about normal things, work gossip, plans for the upcoming Halloween party at church, completely oblivious to the fact that her daughter's world had just shattered into a million pieces. That night, after my parents thought I was asleep, I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. They were in the living room, and my father was on the phone. "She was definitely in there," he said. "Robert's panicking." There was a pause, then, "No, I don't think she understood what she saw. She's only 10. Another pause. "We'll need to be more careful. Maybe it's time to—" I couldn't hear the rest because my mother asked him who he was talking to, and he brushed her off, saying it was a work call. I went back to my room and laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of what I had discovered. My Uncle Robert was doing something terrible to children, collecting information about them, watching them. And my father knew. My father was helping him. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but everything felt different. The breakfast table where my father read his newspaper seemed like a stage set. His smile when he ruffled my hair felt like a mask. My mother noticed I wasn't eating and asked again if I was feeling okay. I wanted to tell her everything, to scream it at the top of my lungs, but the words wouldn't come. How could I explain what I had seen? How could I make her believe that the 2 men she trusted most in the world were monsters? After my parents left for work, I stayed home from school claiming a stomachache. My grandmother came to watch me, and I spent the day curled up on the couch, trying to figure out what to do. That evening, when my parents came home, I finally worked up the courage to speak. I waited until after dinner, when my mother was doing dishes and my father was in his study. I went to my mother first, thinking she would be more likely to believe me. I told her everything about the room, the photographs, the journals, the box with my name on it. I watched her face go from confusion to concern to something I couldn't quite identify. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she dried her hands on a dish towel and said words that would haunt me for decades. "Sarah, honey, you must have had a bad dream. Uncle Robert would never do anything like that. He loves children." I insisted it wasn't a dream, that I had been awake, that I had seen it all with my own eyes. She knelt down in front of me, taking my hands in hers. Sometimes when we're sick, we can imagine things that seem very real. Uncle Robert is a good man. He's family. We don't make up stories about family. The dismissal in her voice was like a slap. I pulled my hands away and ran to find my father, thinking maybe he would listen, maybe he would pretend to be surprised and do something. I found him in his study, and when I burst through the door, he was burning something in the wastebasket next to his desk. He looked up, and for just a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. "Dad," I started, but he cut me off. "Your mother told me about your story," he said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. "This kind of lying is unacceptable, Sarah. Do you understand what accusations like that could do to our family, to Uncle Robert's reputation? To all of us?" I tried to protest, to explain that I wasn't lying, but he stood up, towering over me. "Enough," he said. "I don't want to hear another word about this. Not to us, not to your friends, not to anyone. If I hear you've been spreading these lies, there will be serious consequences. Do I make myself clear?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face, and fled to my room. The next few weeks were a blur of forced normalcy. I went to school, did my homework, attended soccer practice, all while feeling like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I started having trouble sleeping, jumping at shadows, flinching when anyone touched me unexpectedly. My parents attributed it to preteen hormones and the stress of upcoming exams. I stopped eating properly, pushing food around my plate at dinner, my stomach constantly in knots. I began to notice things I hadn't before. How Uncle Robert was always the one volunteering to supervise children's activities at church. How he always had his camera at family gatherings, especially the ones with lots of kids. How my father would sometimes take phone calls in the garage, speaking in hushed tones. I became obsessed with protecting the other children in those photographs. I started walking different routes home from school, trying to spot if anyone was following my classmates. I made excuses to stay close to Emma during Girl Scouts, never letting her out of my sight. My teachers noticed my change in behavior, my drop in grades, my inability to concentrate. They called my parents in for a meeting, but my parents assured them it was just a phase. No one seemed to notice that I had stopped smiling, that the carefree little girl who used to laugh at everything had disappeared, replaced by someone who jumped at her own shadow. The months crawled by, and I learned to pretend. I smiled when I was supposed to smile, laughed when something was meant to be funny, played the role of the normal, happy child while inside I was screaming. I avoided Uncle Robert as much as possible, making excuses to skip family gatherings, pretending to be sick when I couldn't get out of them. But he noticed. At Christmas that year, he cornered me in the hallway of my grandparents' house. "You've been avoiding me, Sarah," he said, his voice low and menacing. "That's not very nice. Family should stick together. Your father and I, we're very close. We share everything." The threat in his words was clear. Years passed, and I grew up carrying this terrible secret. I threw myself into school, into sports, into anything that would keep me busy and away from home. I dated boys my parents didn't approve of, stayed out past curfew, did anything I could to rebel against the perfect family image they were so desperate to maintain. They blamed it on teenage rebellion, never connecting it to that night when I was 10. I counted the days until I could leave for college, until I could put distance between myself and the truth I couldn't speak. When acceptance letters started arriving, I chose the school farthest from home, despite my parents' protests. College was a revelation and a struggle. For the first time, I was away from the suffocating presence of my family, but the memories followed me. I had nightmares about those photographs, about the children in them. I wondered what had happened to them, if they were safe, if some of them had suffered because I hadn't found a way to make someone believe me. I threw myself into psychology classes, trying to understand how people could do such terrible things, how families could harbor such dark secrets. I made friends, fell in love, tried to build a normal life, but always in the back of my mind was the knowledge of what I had left behind, the children who might still be in danger. I limited my contact with family to obligatory holiday calls and the occasional visit. My parents complained that I had become distant, that I was breaking my mother's heart. The guilt was crushing, but not as crushing as the thought of sitting across from my father at dinner, pretending everything was normal. Uncle Robert sent graduation cards, birthday cards, always with too much money enclosed and notes about how proud he was of me. I donated the money to children's charities and threw the cards away. My father would call occasionally, trying to rebuild our relationship, but every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Then, when I was 32, everything changed. I was living in Seattle, working as a social worker specializing in child welfare, when I got a call from my mother. Her voice was strange, strained in a way I'd never heard before. Uncle Robert had been arrested. The charges were vague at first, something about inappropriate conduct with a minor. But as the days passed and more information came out, the full horror of it emerged. He had been caught attempting to lure a young girl into his car near a playground in Millbrook. When police searched his house, they found rooms full of evidence, thousands of photographs spanning decades, videos, detailed records of his obsessions. The hidden rooms I had found as a child were just the tip of the iceberg. The prosecutor's office contacted me after finding old photographs of me in Uncle Robert's collection. A young assistant district attorney named Jennifer Chen called, her voice gentle but professional. She explained that they were building a case and wondered if I had any information that might help. I sat in my Seattle apartment, rain streaming down the windows, and finally, after 22 years, I told someone who would listen. I told her about finding the rooms, about the journals, about my father's involvement. I told her about being silenced, about the years of carrying this secret. She listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then Jennifer said words I had waited over 2 decades to hear. "I believe you, Sarah, and I think you're very brave for speaking up now." I broke down completely, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. All those years of doubt, of wondering if I had imagined it, of being told I was lying. And finally, someone believed me. Jennifer explained that they would need more than my childhood memories to build a case against my father, but that my testimony could be crucial in establishing a pattern of behavior and potentially getting Uncle Robert to reveal accomplices. I flew back to Colorado the next week, my first time home in 3 years. The town looked smaller than I remembered, worn around the edges like an old photograph. I met with Jennifer and the lead detective, a grizzled veteran named Detective Marcus Thompson, who specialized in crimes against children. They showed me some of what they had found, careful to shield me from the worst of it. But what I saw was enough. The photographs of children spanned 40 years. Some of the faces I recognized as kids who had gone missing when I was young, cases that had gone cold and were eventually forgotten by everyone except their families. Detective Thompson asked if I would be willing to wear a wire and try to get my father to talk about his involvement. The thought terrified me, but I agreed. If there was even a chance of getting justice for those children, of preventing more victims, I had to try. They coached me on what to say, how to guide the conversation without seeming suspicious. They fitted me with a tiny recording device that looked like a button on my shirt. And then I called my father and asked if we could have lunch, just the two of us, to talk about everything that was happening with Uncle Robert. We met at a small cafe downtown, the same place he used to take me for milkshakes when I was little. He looked older, grayer, the stress of his brother's arrest showing in new lines on his face. We made small talk at first, dancing around the elephant in the room. Finally, I brought up Uncle Robert's arrest. "I can't believe it," I said, watching his face carefully. "All those children. How long do you think he's been doing this?" My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't know," he said. "Robert always kept to himself." I pushed a little harder. "Dad, I need to tell you something. When I was 10, I found some things at Uncle Robert's house. Photographs, journals. I tried to tell you and Mum, but you didn't believe me." He went very still, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. "Sarah, that was a long time ago. You were just a child. You misunderstood what you saw." I shook my head. "No, Dad, I didn't misunderstand. And I heard you talking to him that night. You knew. You've known all along." For a moment, I thought he was going to deny it, to stick to the story they had maintained for over 20 years. Then his shoulders sagged, and he set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "It's complicated." "Then help me understand," I said, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "Help me understand how you could know what he was doing and not stop him." He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low I had to lean in to hear him. "Robert!" He had things on me, things from when we were younger. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd destroy me, destroy our whole family. I thought I could manage it, keep him away from you, from other kids. I thought I could control it. "But you couldn't," I said, tears burning my eyes. "Those children in the photographs, the missing kids, did you know about them?" He shook his head violently. "No, God, no. I didn't know how far it had gone. I thought it was just the pictures, just watching. I didn't know about the missing children until the police told me." "Just watching," I repeated, disgust clear in my voice. "You say that like it's nothing. Like violating children's privacy, stalking them, collecting trophies of them is somehow acceptable as long as he didn't touch them." "That's not what I meant," he said desperately. "I know it was wrong. I've known it was wrong every day for 30 years, but I was trapped. He had evidence of things I did when I was young, stupid things, criminal things. He would have destroyed everything, my career, our family. Your mother would have left me. You would have grown up in scandal. So instead you let him continue hunting children. You chose your reputation over their safety." The words came out harder than I intended, but I didn't take them back. They were true. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "I tried to protect you," he said weakly. "I made sure he was never alone with you. I watched him at family gatherings. I did what I could." "You did what was convenient," I corrected. "You did what protected yourself. And what about the other children? The ones who weren't your daughter, did you try to protect them?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. We sat in silence for a moment, the cheerful chatter of the cafe a surreal backdrop to our conversation. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for decades. "What did he have on you? What were you so afraid of that you'd protect a predator to keep it secret?" He looked around nervously, then leaned in closer. "When I was 19, Robert and we broke into houses. Just for thrills at first, then for money. One night things went wrong. The homeowner came back unexpectedly. There was a confrontation. The man fell down the stairs. He died. We made it look like an accident, but Robert kept evidence, photos, the tools we used, even a recording he made of me talking about it afterward. He's held it over me ever since." I sat back, processing this new information. My father wasn't just complicit in covering up Uncle Robert's crimes. He was a killer himself. The recording device hidden in my shirt felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "So you've been protecting each other all these years," I said. "Two criminals keeping each other's secrets while children suffered." "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said desperately. "I was young and stupid. I've spent my whole life trying to make up for it, to be a good man, a good father." "You failed," I said simply. "Whatever good you tried to do doesn't erase the evil you allowed to continue." I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, not hard, but desperately. "Sarah, please, your mother doesn't know any of this. It would destroy her." I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then back at his face. "Then maybe she deserves to know who she's been married to all these years." I pulled away and walked out of the cafe, my legs shaking but my resolve firm. I sat in my rental car for 10 minutes, making sure the recording was intact before driving to the police station. Detective Thompson and Jennifer Chen listened to the recording with grim satisfaction. It wasn't a full confession, but it was enough to get a warrant to search my father's home and office. The search turned up more evidence than anyone expected. Hidden in a safe in my father's home office, they found documents related to the break-in from 30 years ago, including newspaper clippings about the accidental death. They also found correspondence between him and Uncle Robert, years of emails and letters discussing their mutual need for silence. Most damning, they found an external hard drive containing copies of some of Uncle Robert's photographs, suggesting my father wasn't as innocent a bystander as he claimed. They arrested him that evening as he was leaving his office. I wasn't there, but I heard about it later from Jennifer. He didn't resist, didn't protest. He just asked if he could call his lawyer. My mother called me that night, hysterical. "What have you done?" she screamed into the phone. "How could you do this to us? To our family?" I tried to explain, to make her understand that I hadn't done anything except finally tell the truth, but she wasn't interested in listening. She accused me of being vindictive, of trying to destroy the family out of some twisted need for attention. "He's your father," she kept saying, as if that excused everything. I hung up on her, something I'd never done before, and turned off my phone. I spent that night in my hotel room, ordering room service I couldn't eat, and watching old sitcoms, trying to distract myself from the magnitude of what was happening. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal procedures, media attention, and family drama. Uncle Robert's case was moving forward, with more victims coming forward every day. Some were adults now, finally feeling safe enough to speak up. Others were recent victims, children who had been approached or photographed without their knowledge. The scope of his crimes was staggering. My father's case was more complex. His lawyer was arguing that he had been coerced by his brother, that he was a victim himself. The prosecution was pushing for charges related to the old break-in and murder, as well as accessory charges for his knowledge of Uncle Robert's crimes. I testified before a grand jury, telling my story once again, this time under oath. The room was smaller than I expected, more intimate. I could see the jurors' faces as I spoke, watch their expressions shift from skepticism to horror, as I described what I had found as a child and how my parents had silenced me. Some of them had tears in their eyes by the time I finished. One older woman mouthed, "I'm sorry," as I stepped down. The grand jury indicted both men on multiple charges. Uncle Robert faced dozens of counts related to child exploitation and abuse. My father faced fewer charges but serious ones: accessory to child exploitation, evidence tampering, and felony murder for the decades-old death. My mother filed for divorce shortly after the indictments were handed down, not because she believed my father was guilty, but because the scandal was too much for her to bear. She moved in with her sister in Iowa and stopped speaking to me entirely. Other family members were divided. Some believed me and expressed horror at being deceived for so long. Others accused me of destroying the family, of airing dirty laundry that should have stayed private. My cousin Michael, who had suggested that fateful game of hide-and-seek all those years ago, reached out to apologize. He admitted that he too had found troubling things in his father's house, but had been too frightened to speak up. The trials were scheduled for the following spring. In the meantime, I tried to return to some semblance of normal life in Seattle, but normal felt impossible. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus on other people's problems when my own life was imploding. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma and family betrayal. She helped me understand that my years of guilt, my difficulty trusting people, my hypervigilance around children, all of it stemmed from that night when I was 10 and the years of silence that followed. Slowly, painfully, I began to process not just the recent events, but the decades of damage that had preceded them. Jennifer Chen became more than just a prosecutor to me during this time. She became a friend, someone who understood the weight of what I was carrying. She had seen the evidence, had interviewed the other victims. She knew the full scope of the horror I had uncovered as a child. We would sometimes meet for coffee after trial prep sessions, and she would remind me that what I was doing was brave, that my testimony could save other children from similar fates. It helped, having someone in my corner who never doubted me, who never suggested I was exaggerating or misremembering or lying for attention. As the trial date approached, more information came to light. Investigators had traced some of Uncle Robert's activities back 40 years, to when he was barely out of college. They found connections to other predators, though not the vast network he had claimed in a desperate attempt to broker a deal. My father's involvement appeared to have been mostly passive, covering up, destroying evidence, providing alibis, but passive complicity in the face of such evil was still criminal. The prosecution built a strong case, using my testimony as a cornerstone to establish the long pattern of behavior and cover-up. The week before the trial was set to begin, I received a letter from my father. He was being held without bail, deemed a flight risk. The letter was short, written in his careful handwriting that I remembered from birthday cards and notes in my school lunches. Sarah, it began. I know you'll probably tear this up without reading it, but I need to try. I failed you as a father. I failed those children. I failed myself. I told myself I was protecting our family, but I was only protecting myself. You were right about everything. I don't ask for your forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I just want you to know that I'm going to plead guilty. I'm going to tell them everything I know. It's too little, too late, but it's all I have left to give. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. Dad. I read the letter 3 times, then sat with it in my lap, unsure how to feel. The apology I had wanted for 23 years felt hollow now that I had it. How could sorry begin to encompass the years of gaslighting, the children who had suffered, the lives that had been destroyed? I thought about responding, but what was there to say? Instead, I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box with other documents related to the case. Maybe someday I would know what to do with it. For now, it was just another piece of evidence of how far my father had fallen from the man I once believed him to be. True to his word, my father pled guilty to all charges. His allocution was detailed and damning, laying out not just his own crimes, but providing crucial information about Uncle Robert's methods and victims. He stood in the courtroom in his orange jumpsuit, looking like a shadow of his former self, and admitted to helping cover up the abuse of at least 15 children that he knew of. He admitted to destroying evidence, to intimidating potential witnesses, to moving money that Uncle Robert used to finance his activities. He admitted to the murder from 30 years ago, providing details that matched cold case files. When he finished speaking, the courtroom was silent, except for the soft crying of some of the victims' family members who had come to bear witness. I was there that day, sitting in the back row, trying to reconcile the broken man at the defendant's table with the father who had taught me to ride a bike, who had read me bedtime stories, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding. It was impossible. They were 2 different people, or maybe they had always been the same person, and I had just been too young, too trusting to see it. When he was led away after sentencing, 25 years with possibility of parole after 15, he looked back at the gallery. Our eyes met for just a moment. I saw regret there, and shame, and something that might have been relief. Then he was gone, and I knew I would probably never see him again. Uncle Robert's trial was a longer, more complex affair. He had refused to plead guilty, maintaining his innocence despite overwhelming evidence. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Thousands of photographs, videos, detailed journals spanning decades, testimony from dozens of victims. I testified on the 3rd day, describing once again what I had found in that hidden room when I was 10. This time, though, I wasn't just a voice for my younger self. I was a voice for all the children whose pictures had covered those walls, whose innocence had been stolen by a predator protected by family silence. The defense tried to discredit me, suggesting I had manufactured memories or exaggerated what I had seen, but the physical evidence supported every word of my testimony. The journals I had described were there, the photographs, the trophies. It all matched. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Uncle Robert was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, he showed no emotion, just stared straight ahead as if none of it was really happening. Some of the victims' families hugged each other, finding some measure of closure after years of not knowing what had happened to their children. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, just a bone-deep exhaustion and the hollow feeling that comes from a justice served too late. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions that I ignored. I had given my testimony, I had told my truth. That was all I had to give. In the aftermath of the trials, I struggled to find my footing. The story had made national news, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about what I should have done differently, how I should feel, whether I was a hero or a villain for turning in my own father. I deleted social media, changed my phone number, tried to create some barrier between myself and the noise. I returned to work eventually, finding purpose in protecting children in a way I hadn't been protected, but trust came hard. Every family I worked with, I wondered what secrets they might be hiding. Every parent who seemed too perfect, too protective, or not protective enough set off alarm bells in my head. My supervisor noticed and gently suggested I might benefit from more therapy, which I knew was code for you're projecting your trauma onto your cases. She was right, of course. I went back to therapy, this time with a trauma specialist who understood the complex grief that comes from losing your family, not to death, but to truth. We worked through the anger, the guilt, the what-ifs that plagued me. What if I had tried harder to make someone believe me when I was 10? What if I had gone to the police myself as a teenager? What if? Slowly, I learned to let go of the responsibility I had carried for so long. I was a child when I discovered the truth. The adults in my life had failed me, had failed all those children. That wasn't my burden to bear. 5 years have passed since the trials. I'm 37 now, living in Portland, still working in child welfare, but with better boundaries, more wisdom about what I can and cannot control. I haven't spoken to my mother since the day she called me a family destroyer. I heard through relatives that she's remarried, living in Florida now, telling people her first husband died rather than admit the truth. Sometimes I think about reaching out, but then I remember how she chose willful blindness over protecting her daughter, and I let the impulse pass. Some bridges once burned are better left as ashes. I've built a new kind of family, one made of choice rather than blood. Friends who stood by me through the trial and its aftermath. Colleagues who understand the importance of the work we do. A partner who knows my whole story and loves me not in spite of it, but because of the strength it revealed. We're talking about having children of our own someday, and the thought both terrifies and thrills me. I know I'll be hypervigilant, perhaps overprotective, but I also know I'll believe them if they tell me something is wrong. I'll teach them that family isn't a reason to keep secrets, that love isn't conditional on silence, that their safety matters more than anyone's reputation. Sometimes I have dreams about that hidden room, about 10-year-old me finding those photographs and journals. In the dreams, sometimes someone believes me right away. Sometimes the police come that very night and arrest Uncle Robert before he can hurt anyone else. Sometimes my father chooses his daughter over his brother, chooses truth over comfortable lies. But then I wake up and I remember that's not how it happened. I remember the years of silence, the gaslighting, the price of family secrets. And I remind myself that eventually the truth did come out. Eventually there was justice, imperfect and delayed, but justice nonetheless. Eventually I found my voice and used it. Last month, I received a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from one of the mothers whose child had been photographed by Uncle Robert. She thanked me for my courage in speaking up, for enduring years of disbelief and family rejection to finally bring the truth to light. Her daughter, she wrote, was doing well. She was in college now, studying to become a teacher. She had been able to heal because she knew her stalker was behind bars, because she knew someone had fought for her even when she didn't know she needed protecting. I cried reading that letter, the kind of cleansing tears that wash away a little bit of the guilt and pain. It reminded me why I had spoken up, why the destruction of my family as I knew it had been necessary. There are still hard days. Holidays are particularly difficult, filled with memories of family gatherings that were never as perfect as they seemed. I see families in stores choosing Christmas trees or shopping for Thanksgiving dinners, and I feel a pang of loss for the innocence I once had, the belief that family meant safety and love and protection. But I've learned to create new traditions, new meanings for these seasons. I volunteer at shelters, bringing some joy to children who, like me, have learned too young that family can be dangerous. I host dinners for other survivors, creating space for those of us who understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is tell the truth, even when it burns everything down. The investigator who worked my case, Detective Thompson, retired last year. Before he left, he called to tell me that the work I had done, the testimony I had given, had led to changes in how they investigate cases involving children. They now take children's reports more seriously, dig deeper when family members seem involved, understand better how predators use family loyalty as a shield. It's a small legacy from an enormous pain, but it's something. Maybe some child somewhere will be believed the first time because of what I went through. Maybe some families' secrets will be exposed before decades pass and more children are hurt. I think about my father sometimes. Wonder if he's changed in prison or if he's just become better at pretending. He'll be eligible for parole in another 10 years when he's 72. I've already decided I'll speak at his parole hearing, not to advocate for his release or continued imprisonment, but to remind the board of the children who were hurt while he chose silence, to be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. He made his choices every day for 30 years. Now he lives with the consequences, as do I, as do all the children whose pictures covered those horrible walls. People sometimes ask me if I regret destroying my family. The question always strikes me as backward. I didn't destroy anything. I revealed what was already broken, already rotten beneath the pleasant surface. The destruction happened long before I spoke up. It happened every time my uncle took a photograph of an unwitting child, every time my father chose to look away, every time my mother refused to see what was right in front of her. All I did was strip away the veneer and expose the termite-eaten foundation beneath. If that's destruction, then yes, I destroyed my family, and I would do it again, because some things need to be destroyed so that healing can begin. The work continues. Every day in my job, I look for signs others might miss, listen for the truths children are afraid to speak. I teach new social workers to pay attention when children's behavior changes suddenly, when they stop trusting adults, when they seem to be carrying secrets too heavy for their small shoulders. I tell them my story sometimes, in trainings and conferences, stripped of personal details, but with the essential truth intact. Children see things adults wish they wouldn't. And when we don't believe them, when we prioritize family reputation over their safety, we become complicit in their harm. It's a hard truth, but a necessary one. I've learned to find joy again, though it's different from the carefree happiness I knew before that night in Uncle Robert's house. It's a more complicated joy, threaded with awareness of how fragile safety is, how easily trust can be betrayed. But it's also deeper, more genuine, based on relationships where truth is valued over comfort, where love doesn't require silence. I've learned that family isn't about blood or obligation or maintaining appearances. It's about the people who believe you, who stand with you when the truth is ugly, who choose protection over reputation. By that definition, I have more family now than I ever did growing up. Sometimes young survivors reach out to me, us having heard my story through the convoluted networks that connect those of us who've lived through family betrayal. They ask how I found the courage to speak up, how I survived the years of silence, how I deal with the loss of my biological family. I tell them the truth. It wasn't courage that made me speak, it was exhaustion. I was tired of carrying secrets that weren't mine to keep. The silence didn't protect me. It protected the people who hurt me. And as for losing my family, I tell them what I've learned. You can't lose something you never really had. The family I thought I had, safe, loving, protective, was an illusion. The reality was a family built on lies, maintained by threats, held together by shared complicity in horror. Losing that was liberation, not loss. There's no neat ending to this story, no moment where everything becomes okay. Uncle Robert will die in prison, unrepentant to the end if his behavior at trial was any indication. My father might get out one day, an old man with nowhere to go and no one to welcome him home. My mother will probably go to her grave believing I betrayed the family rather than saved what could be saved of it. The children in those photographs, now adults, will carry their trauma forward in ways seen and unseen. Some will heal, some won't. Some will find justice in the convictions. Others will always wonder why no one protected them sooner. All of us will live with the ripple effects of choices made in hidden rooms and dark corners. But here's what I know now that I didn't know at 10 or 20 or even 30. Speaking the truth, even when it destroys everything you thought you knew, even when no one believes you, even when it takes decades to be heard, is the only way to break cycles of abuse. Silence is the fertile ground in which predators flourish. Family loyalty becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to keep secrets, refuse to be complicit, refuse to let family blood wash away the stains of innocent blood spilled. It's a hard truth, a painful truth, but it's the truth nonetheless. And after a lifetime of lies, truth, however devastating, feels like freedom. Today marks exactly 27 years since I found that room. I'm standing in my Portland office, looking out at the rain-washed streets, preparing for another day of fighting for children who can't fight for themselves. On my desk is a photo from last week, me with my chosen family at my birthday dinner, all of us laughing at something I can't remember now. It's the kind of photo that might have ended up on Uncle Robert's wall if I'd been one of his targets rather than his niece. But in my life, it's just a moment of joy, freely given and received, no shadows lurking behind the smiles. That's the victory, really. Not the convictions or the sentences or the justice served too late. The victory is in the life I've built from the ashes, the joy I've found despite the darkness, the family I've chosen who would believe me from the first word. The victory is in every child I help, every survivor I support, every secret brought into the light before it can fester and spread. The victory is in the truth, messy and painful and devastating as it is. Because here's the thing about family secrets, they're never really secret. Someone always knows. Someone always sees. And somewhere a child is watching, understanding more than the adults think they do, carrying truths too heavy for their small shoulders. My story is for them, for the ones hiding in closets and finding rooms they shouldn't, for the ones being told they're lying or imagining things or trying to destroy the family. You're not crazy, you're not lying, and it's not your job to protect the family from the truth. It's the family's job to protect you. If they won't, if they can't, if they choose comfortable lies over difficult truths, then you get to choose too. You get to choose truth over silence, safety over reputation, healing over harm. Even if it takes years, even if it costs everything, even if you have to build a whole new life from the ground up, the truth, your truth, is worth it. You are worth it, always.